the Georgia Dome. We're going to invite our guests to, well, should we just get started since you started streaming?
Let's do it. Yeah, we're streaming. Let's go.
All right, let's get started then. John, typically you start. You on mute.
Yeah.
You on mute, my brother. Okay. We still can't hear you, John. No, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Excellent. All right, take us in.
Hold on real quick. Let me get, because Jackie was so did y'all listen to the last episode?
Yeah.
How did y'all feel about Jackie's
It was super low.
It was a little low.
That's what I was saying. That's what I was like, I know I'm not crazy, but I was like, okay, maybe I'm tripping. Okay, so Jackie's was a little lower. Let me hear you again.
Testing 1 2 3.
Okay, see, that's better. Do it again.
Testing 1 2 3.
See, that's a whole lot better. All right, let me get you, Amber.
What up?
Okay, that's good. Let me get you, Christina.
Hey.
Can you come up some?
That's all I got. You can't hear me? You know,
I mean,
talk a lot louder.
Good. Do you have headphones?
I do. Let me go grab them. I don't know if they'll be any good, but let me go grab them. Hold on.
Okay.
Can we pause the streaming until we kind
I
of
was thinking the same thing.
Pause the streaming. I mean, nobody's.
I know ain't nobody looking, but still.
Yeah, I don't want no behind the scenes footage.
Right, I was gonna say.
At the very end, maybe.
How do I pause the streaming? Just
I
pause.
don't know. Never mind. Just keep it going. Just keep it going.
Okay. And then Kunle, let me get you.
You're
Kunle sound low too. Let me get you again.
This is Kunle. Kunle testing 1 2 3.
Okay, you good. You good, Elizabeth? Let me get you.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Okay, you good. Christina?
Is that better?
That's better.
That's better. Yeah, that's much better.
Okay.
All right, so we got it recorded now. We're going live on YouTube. I don't know how to go live on YouTube and Facebook. So
We just stay here.
let's go right here. And how do I sound to y'all? Am I good?
Yep, you solid.
Okay. So if we're doing this live, and then what I'm gonna do, because I still want to throw this on Facebook. So let me give me less than a minute, and then we can move.
Nobody thinks John's voice is a little deeper than it usually is. Is that like the mic setting?
That's why I can't say this nigga. Bro.
Well, now listening to the smooth sound of the Street Academy podcast.
Everything. Street Academy.
I think it's really cute the way you matched your shirt with your wall art. Sweets.
I mean, we do what we can, just a little drip. You feel me? Just a little drip.
I wonder how those two greats would feel about you talking about Atlanta in the way that you were speaking.
Oh.
Well, are you talking about Malcolm X and
Well,
King?
I couldn't tell that was Malcolm X, and who is that?
King.
I thought that was Outkast, because that's like their.
I know it's a play on it, but I mean to be fair, like Outkast, Andre 3000 is my favorite rapper of all time. I'm not saying there hasn't been great things that came out of Atlanta. Lauryn Hill is my favorite artist of all time. We're not gonna get into a music discussion. That's gonna be a whole.
We're not.
Bring me back for that one though, because I have plenty to say.
We're not. Oh, I didn't realize that was Malcolm X, and who did you say?
Martin.
Oh, it's Malcolm X. Well, Martin Luther King kind of way. about you talking about Atlanta. All right,
That's what
John.
I'm saying.
Ready?
I have things, but it's cool.
Yeah. All right, we good? We ready, y'all?
Yep. Let's
Welcome
go.
back, y'all. Street Academy Podcast, where we keep one foot in the academy and one foot in the streets. Yo, this is amazing. I'm excited. Shout out to everybody on live stream, YouTube, folks watching on Facebook, folks watching everywhere. Super, super excited. As you all can see,
We got a full house.
man, we got a full house up in here, man. Like we doing it. You know what I'm saying? We look Street Academy Podcast. Bro. Hold on, bro. This thing gonna blow up. Got a couple new followers, couple new subscribers. Christina, I seen the subscribe. Appreciate you. Everybody, make sure y'all go and y'all subscribe. Y'all follow us at Street Academy Podcast on IG. We just got a feature on another podcast, IG. So, I mean, we moving, man. We getting things going. I promise you, about another year or so, this thing bringing in dough. We're bringing in money. You know what I'm saying? We gonna be taking, flipping. Black-owned businesses controlling content. That's what we doing around here. So that's what's going on. As you all can tell, we got a full house. Super, super excited about the topic for today. And I think Amber, you want to kind of take us into that, just introduce us on that.
So I'm going to give us the rundown of what we're going to happen today. So now in season 2 of Street Academy Podcast, we are a pinch more organized than we were before. And so we are now in segments. So we start off our podcast this time with check-ins. We're going to skip past that and allow our guest co-hosts to introduce themselves. So we're going to start with introductions. Then we're going to go to a segment called Off the Georgia Dome, where everyone will give their quick thoughts about our topic for the day. And this time, since last week, we already, from the standard co-hosts, you already heard what our quick thoughts were about the topic, which is what does it mean to be Black? We're going to give that moment to our co-host today, our guest co-host, so that they can say what do they quickly think about what does it mean to be Black. Then we'll just go right into conversation, and then we're going to close with a segment that we call the takeout boxes, which we will share what our main takeaways are. So we're ready to get started. I just want to allow our co-hosts to introduce themselves. We can go with Christina, then Kunle, then Elizabeth.
What's up, everybody? Good morning. Good morning. I am Christina. Born and raised in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I have to preface it. It's New Mexico, the state, not Mexico, the country, because everybody always gets that confused. I am half Black, half Mexican, identify as Black. My experiences growing up in New Mexico, very Black. So I'm looking forward to sharing more of that.
Thank you, Christina.
I am Kunle Owolabi, Nigerian royalty, the plantain poppy. Originally from Chicago, Illinois, Nigerian by heritage. Identify as Nigerian, and that is me.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Elizabeth. I was born and kind of raised in Ethiopia. I moved when I was 6, and I spent the rest of my childhood in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I identify as Ethiopian. And yeah, Ethiopia.
Thank you. Welcome, co-hosts. Everybody out there in internet land, just clap it up for our co-hosts, our co-guest panelists. One thing that we didn't do, Jackie and John, last week is talk about what our individual heritage is. And so I'll start and then I'll let you all say that, because that's relevant for this conversation, because we're talking about what does it mean to be Black and what are all the types of Black and how our different perspectives can be shaped by our own individual heritages. Right. So I am Black American on both sides. Mom and dad are both Black American from the South. Families are from Georgia and from Alabama.
Okay, I guess I'll come in. My name is Jonathan Grant. I'm originally from Jacksonville, Florida. All my people from the South. I want to say my cousin did like a whole genealogy and found out the first bank he was able to go on my mother's side was our earlier ancestors was dropped off at this huge not plantation, but it was like a huge like slave port. I think it was in Charleston, South Carolina or whatever, was like the biggest one at that time. And so he was able to trace our lineage on my mother's side back to that port. So I don't know where I'm from past that. but we was all South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, all there.
Wow. Wow. I am Afro-Caribbean. That's how I identify culturally. My parents are both Caribbean, but my mom, and as far back as her family goes, interestingly, they are Black American because they are from an island that is colonized and currently occupied by the United States of America. And the history of that island is that it switched hands as far as governments. But she's from the U.S. Virgin Islands. My dad is from the British Virgin Islands. So technically, I'm Black American and British. Like, I guess, I guess politically. I mean, I know it's like politically or like citizenship.
Wait, I didn't catch that earlier. So your dad is from the British Virgin Islands and your mom is from the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Right.
What do they call themselves there? What's like
Virgin Islanders.
Virgin Islanders.
Mhm.
Okay. So both islands call themselves Virgin Islanders.
Mhm.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, because there are separate islands too. So someone from St. Thomas would call themselves like a St. Thomian.
Oh, St. Thomian. I didn't know
I
that.
didn't know that. Today years old. Okay.
Oh, and I forgot to say my identity, but I identify as Black, African American, and I identify as African as well.
You
I identify as Black and more Black.
I also identify as Black. All right, well, let's get into this conversation. That I'm still kind of like I just with the U.S. and the British Virgin Islands, just not even recognizing how that stuff connects. I'm still kind of like
Complicated.
I really need a geography lesson and just study. I actually have an Africa map in my hallway, and I've just been trying to test myself. And with just like I test myself and my boyfriend, where we're just like, okay, let me just say, what are the countries that border Chad? And because I'm just trying to understand, like, okay, so like let's think about Ghana, what 4 countries or 3 countries or whatever. Just because I'm like, I need to understand the geography of at least the motherland. But anywho, all right, we're gonna go right into it. Elizabeth, Kunle, and Christina, what does it mean to be Black? Off the Georgia Dome, about a minute or so apiece.
Who wants to go?
ladies first.
Yes, Elizabeth, Kunle, Christina.
Oh, okay, that's the order. Sorry. So, in order, I think to be Black is to identify with your ethnic self, whether or not you have direct ties to Africa or not. I think it's very much affiliated with your skin color and how the world treats and receives you. I think from an outside perspective, I think that Blackness is very much tied to skin color and the way that society you react to how society treats you. And then culturally, I think Blackness is the collective experiences or the collective definition and accumulation of historical and ancestral kind of traditions and patterns that we maintain, that we collect, that we continue to kind of keep alive through tradition, through storytelling, and through community.
Okay.
I probably should have gone first. It's hard to like say something after that. I mean, basically everything Elizabeth just said. You know, like Blackness kind of goes with complexion for the most part. Here in America, I think that like for me, there's like a duality between how the world perceives Blackness or
It's kind of breaking up a little bit.
Is it breaking up for y'all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Am I breaking up?
Nah, you good.
Uh-oh.
Kunle, you breaking up.
I feel like, yeah, we can't like capturing what you're saying.
I need to put this in the notes so I can edit this. Edit this part out. Kunle, you good?
Still frozen.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
Jackie, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay.
I mean, we're on 2 different networks. I think that's what it is.
Oh, is that what it is?
Oh, okay. Got you.
So.
Oh, maybe we should let people know that, for those who don't know.
Yeah, I'm not just like being rude to our guests by like rolling my eyes when he says like certain ridiculous things. I'm being rude to my lifelong partner.
Better half.
Yes, because I hear some of these ridiculous comments day in and day out. He's just in the next room. Yeah, he's in the next room. But
Okay.
hopefully he's about to
come back on. Well, we'll keep the conversation moving then. Christina, can you share what you think it is, what it means to be Black?
I think honestly that Blackness cannot be identified in one thing because it's all encompassing. It is everything. I think Blackness is truly revolutionary. I think Blackness is imagination. I think Blackness is creativity. I also think Blackness is struggle, and I also think Blackness is, overcoming and resiliency and resistance. So it's really hard for me to kind of dwindle down Blackness into just like one thing because it just means everything to me. So.
Snap.
Nice.
Well, I would love for Kunle to come back so he can share his, but whenever he comes back, we'll be able to talk through that. So then let's just jump into the conversation. So we're all coming from all these different perspectives. I want to kind of start with Christina a little bit in terms of you being biracial and you being half Mexican and half Black. What were some of the ways that you had to kind of grapple with your identity growing up?
So for me personally, I think contrary to like a popular belief about people who, are biracial or like mixed race, that there's this struggle with identity. And that's not a struggle that I ever had. I think that my phenotype, the way I'm built, especially my hair when I was younger, everything about me kind of looked more or leaned more to a Blackness. And so growing up in New Mexico, there wasn't a lot of Black people, but there were enough. It was a very segregated city. And so everybody who was Black lived on one side of the city, and that's where we lived. Everything about my household growing up was Black. We grew up in the Nation of Islam, which I'm not a practicer or a follower of at this time, but it's very Black. It's very Black centered, everything about that, the philosophies. And so there was never a struggle for me personally, identity wise. Mexican people were not welcoming. They were not kind. They did not treat me as if I was a Mexican person. They treated me as if I was other. They treated me as if I was Black. I didn't got into more fights than I can tell you growing up because I didn't got called a nigga or a mayate, which for those of you who don't know, that's a Spanish word for nigga. And so some of my yeah. And so some of my first, actually, to be honest with you, some of my first experiences with racial prejudice came not just from Mexican people, but actually my own family members. My mother, when I'm the oldest, and when my mom had me, her family completely stopped talking to her for years because she was with a Black man. And there's still been issues. I have 2 living uncles who I have no communication with to this day, who quite frequently have called us niggers on numerous occasions. My first encounter with one of my uncles was him yelling and screaming at my mom about her bringing her nigger babies around, and that he has half white kids, and that there was a difference, that his kids were half white, so his kids would be accepted where her kids wouldn't. And so for me personally, there's never been a grappling of who I am. I have always embraced my Mexican heritage and my Mexican identity. I love Mexican food. Some of the best food on the planet, so let's not play. But as far as who I was and who I am, everything about me was centered and rooted in Blackness. And so there was no identity struggle for me. And that, as I said, my mom is Mexican, my dad is Black. I would never take away from anything about who she is because she's just been such a great anchor in my life. But I've always respected how she also understood that there were things she couldn't give us because she was not Black, there were moments where I had to watch her kind of step away from mothering and say, you got to go and learn stuff from these women because I can't give you that. I can't understand that. And so I've always respected and appreciated about her. And so, you know, to double back around, I've never had an identity struggle in that regard. So.
Wow. Would you mind sharing what's one of the examples of one of the things that your mom said? I can't really handle this. You go talk to someone else.
Yeah. So when I was growing up, as I stated earlier, physically, right, I just looked very different than all the girls. My school was predominantly Mexican. There was only about 4 or 5 Black girls. We all kind of grew up in the same neighborhood. You know, it sounds funny to say, but I'll just share this because it is relevant. I have a very large behind. I'm very curvy. And that's not what the other girls look like. Mm-hmm. And so I remember coming home one day, my mom's not built like that. And so I remember coming home one day crying because I was getting made fun of because my bottom half. And I was really upset. And my mom was like, I want you to come, I'm going to set you up and I want you to go talk to some of the women in the neighborhood. She's like, because I can't help you through this. I can't explain to you what this feels like. And I remember very distinctly, she telling me, I understand that this is because you're Black. And so she kind of just gave them off. And I got a lot of really good knowledge and a lot of self-confidence. There was obviously some things I had to work through because kids could be cruel, but that was just an example. She would do that a lot. But my mom was also really good about learning things. Like when I tell you, when I was younger, my mama could braid. My mama was the best braider in the neighborhood. I never stayed with my hair undone, and everybody wanted to come get their hair braided from my mama. So there were things that she embraced to make sure that, you know, we kind of felt very comfortable in our Blackness. But when she knew that this was something she couldn't handle because she couldn't identify, she very much stepped away from it. And I've always appreciated and loved and respected that from her.
Wow, shout out to your mama, man.
Yeah, Mama Dukes is great. I love her.
Wow, that I don't hear that story as often. Like, I really appreciate you sharing that because I feel like of the interracial kind of stories that I've heard, it's been with there's more oftentimes than not, there's a story of one of the parents just really not having an understanding at all of the other parents' racial background, and kind of like, I think not doing what your mom did was just to say, I know where the edges of my competencies are, and I'm okay with that. And I'm going to actually, you know, reach out and like give my daughter what she needs because I know my limits. I feel like that's so beautiful. That's such a, I feel a little seriously. And I'm just thinking about
my competencies. I like that.
What'd you say?
I said, let's go edges of my competencies. I'm gonna write that down.
And then just the struggling with your Mexican side of the family, and then even that dynamic of the Mexican and white cousins. Do you have any relationships with the Mexican and white cousins?
Absolutely not. And it's very much centered around the racial dynamics. Matter of fact, most recently, there was an argument that took place. So real quick, for those of you who don't know, I have a brother that did play in the NFL, and he was actually one of the football players that kneeled right along with Cap. Obviously, there was a lot of pushback. And a lot of pushback towards the family, particularly. And so some of the cousins, one of them in particular, reached out. He didn't reach out to my brother. He reached out to my mom and was like, your children are niggers and da-da-da-da-da. And so, you know, we had to like, nah, you're not coming at mom. If you got a problem with anything, you got to come at us. And that's always kind of the go-to for them. When there is any interaction, it always kind of ends in, don't forget that's who you are, right? And so for me, I think that's a large part of why there's never been this struggle, because for me, Mexican people have always reminded me that I'm not one of them, right? Or they've always let that be known. And so Black people were very embracing. Black people loved me through all of my struggles. And I don't see why I wouldn't return that to my community because they gave that to me. So
there is so much there. Like, I'm just thinking about like this sort of unity around like Latinidad and just like this sort of like overall unity, but there's certainly like anti-Blackness that people get called out on. But my real question is like, when were hands thrown? Because you ain't just gonna be throwing around the N-word like that. Like when were the hands thrown? That's my question.
Very early, very early. Let's see.
Early enough.
My
3,
first
4 years
fight,
old. We was
yeah. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, honestly, my first fight around that was in 3rd grade. And a little Mexican girl, she was following me home. It was me and actually one of my other friends who was half black. She was half black and half white. And they were following us home, her and all her cousins. And it was nigga this and nigga that. And I had to turn around like, I'm not gonna be too much more like that's not what we're gonna do. And it was like, what you gonna do, Mayate? And so I had to show them what I could do. And that happened on numerous occasions. It wasn't uncommon and to have to defend my blackness in that regard. So and we're not even talking about getting into like teachers at school and all that.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
teachers in school.
Yeah.
So speaking of, it just reminded me that Black people can't catch a break anywhere.
No, I almost want to like reach through the screen and be like, "Are you okay? Are you whole? Did you make it?"
New Mexico is not a place in my mind that I would put on the map as being a problematic state. Just because, also, I don't know anybody else from New Mexico, but it's just like that sounds very Mississippian but
I think
and no shade to Mississippi people. Yeah.
People always kind of get that, like, what? They don't like Black people? And how? And like, it's a predominantly Mexican state, right? But it's also, it's heavy white. And so what I always tell people, what I always explain to people is that bigger than racism is anti-Blackness, right? Like that's always prevalent and it's always there. And so many other non-white groups have tried to or have embraced anti-Blackness in an attempt to kind of assimilate with white culture. And so as I've gotten older, there's no surprise to me that is what my experiences were. It's just like, yeah, this is who people are, because people are very embracing of white supremacy, and anti-Blackness is like at the core of that. So
right.
I want to such an important point. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I was thinking, as I was watching the previous session that you guys did, and like the proximity to whiteness that you guys were talking about, and what you're saying, Christina, about people, it's like a self-defense mechanism where it's like, you know what the institutions in play are, you know what the positions of power are, so you just naturally want to gravitate towards wherever the source of power is, and you want to alienate, you know what I mean? Like, I'm a step away from you. Like if I catch the tan in the wrong direction, I'm Black too, or I could be perceived as Black. So in an effort to kind of make sure that the divide is as big as I can make it, like I will make sure you know that I am closer to being white than you will ever be. And I'll do my very best to make sure that I will forever move closer and closer, and then therefore distance you more and more. And when I think about my identity as an African woman, and just the history of Africa and the way that the white colonizers have continued to create divide. Like when you look at Ethiopians, like I can't even in my own, like I know Ethiopia, I can't look at another Ethiopian and tell you what ethnic group they're a part of. Only language will tell you that. And language you can learn, but in Ethiopia right now, there's this huge kind of ethnic, kind of almost warfare that's going on where one ethnic group is saying I'm better than the other ethnic group. And so all of that kind of like self-seated hatred has even reached to countries where you can't visually separate people. There's no marker that says like, okay, you're white, I'm Black. So if that exists in a place where visually I can't separate and you can't distinguish from one another, I'm not shocked, I guess, that it continues to happen in places where you can visually, it's easier to visually separate people, you know?
Mm. So for you growing up, Elizabeth, when you came over like around 6, how was it for you being like, I know you said the your school was predominantly white that you went to. How was that being probably one of the Black kids and then also being one of the non-Black American kids, like something that people might not have been accustomed to seeing? How was that growing up?
I mean, I was never white enough to be white, and I was never Black enough to be Black, right? So it was always like, you speak too white to be around the Black kids, and then it was always like, but you're not Black, you're not white, you know what I mean? So I was very much aware of the fact that I was other always, and so I could never find a synchronized kind of community to be a part of outside of my Ethiopian family. And even like Boston the Ethiopian population has increased dramatically since I've grown up, but while I was growing up, my family was the only one in the school, so we were always like othered in so many aspects, right? So And education was a huge thing. And unfortunately, there was this culture of like, if you are well informed, or if you really care about your education, then you're forfeiting your Black card. And that was the vibe that existed at the school that I went to, where it's like, if you're in AP classes or if you're in honors classes, like you're not really that Black. You try to be white, you know. And then in those classes, you're always looked upon to kind of comment on the Black experience. So you're always kind of like, where am I, you know? And so defining my identity, I think, came more and more in college when I started taking more African-American history classes that weren't focused on, I feel like history classes always started at the Civil War. And nothing happened before that. There was no conversation about who we were as a people and what happened to us as a people. So resilience and kind of self-understanding didn't exist before then. And even in Ethiopian history, like Ethiopia was never colonized, but there's so little history that is taught to us. And even in the movie Wakanda, right? Like I feel like we all gravitated towards it because we got this representation of who we were prior to this like ravaged people of slavery.
Wakanda forever.
Yeah, exactly.
R.P. Chadwick. Keep going. I'm sorry.
That's like, continue.
Yeah. There's so much there. Kunle, we know that you just came back and you didn't get a chance to say what does Blackness mean to you. So what the co-guest just said, and go into what your definition is.
I think it's interesting for me because honestly, so my first name is Chris, and my father named me Chris because he was Catholic when he was younger, and so when you turn 14, you get named after one of the saints, and he got named after Saint Christopher. And then once he got to America, he started going by Christopher instead of because I'm named after him. His name is Adekunle, and I'm Adekunle. He started going by Christopher because in the 80s and like late 70s, like coming to America, like it was difficult for Nigerians or Africans just in general to really get like corporate jobs with their names. Like people didn't really care to pronounce or understand. Like your application basically got thrown away immediately if you didn't have a English regular name, essentially. So he named me that because he knew how America worked. So growing up, I had like an identity crisis for the most part. Like I didn't identify with Nigerians at all, even to the point that, especially because growing up, I grew up in Black areas, but there weren't a whole lot of Nigerians around me. So like the Nigerians I knew were like my father's friends' kids, and all of them were weird. So it's like, I don't, like if this is what Nigerians are, if this is the representation of Nigeria, I want no parts of that. Even to the point that my father asked me, I think when I was like 9 or 10, he asked me if I wanted to learn Yoruba, which is the tribe that I'm from, the name of the language. And I told him no. Like I was already getting made fun of, like Owolabi is my last name, and I would, Oso Wobbly, Oso Sloppy. Like
Oso Wobbly.
So creative in their cruelty, man.
People are so cruel.
Yeah. The African booty scratcher. That's like that was like a common one.
The big one.
I don't know. Even have you seen like the new hairstyles where like the kids kind of have like the half dress type thing? Like me and my cousins were doing that when we were in like 7th grade. Like we're just like wash rag. Like that's a common look in Nigeria, and like that is now like popular. Like everybody you see in the NBA has that same look, and it's like back in the day we were getting made fun of heavily for that. And now that's like, so I've had like a struggle like within like the last 5 or 10 years with people who have started to claim, their African roots and look for, where their ancestry comes from, because these are the same niggas that was calling me African booty scratcher 20 years ago. And like, I had like a real issue with them. So it's like, now all of a sudden you want to know where you can find dashikis? Fuck you. Yeah, so
I mean, like that. We couldn't tell. You don't really care for that.
I mean, I've had real issues with that. I mean, I've gotten a little better with that over the last couple of years, but when that first hit like 5 to 7 years ago, and everybody was like, "Oh yeah, well I did my ancestry thing, and I'm like 27% Nigerian." I'm like, we are not claiming you. It's just, but yeah. I have like a weird relationship with Blackness in America, and like an understanding that I'm Nigerian and how Blackness is looked at now, even within myself. Like, because I wasn't always going by Kunle. I started going by Kunle when I was 17, and I met a group of at Nigerian camp meeting. I met a group of Nigerians like that were the same age as me, who understood my same struggles, my same plights, and they identified with it, but they still understood their culture. Like, so now I just started learning how to speak Yoruba like maybe 2 years ago. But like that's like a more current thing for me. So like in the same way that like there are people who are just now starting to accept, their Blackness beyond America. Like I've not just started, it's probably been like 10, 15 years, but like it hasn't always been the case for me as well. So I have a weird relationship between it all.
Yeah. So I actually got kind of a two-parter to Kunle. Number one, me and Kunle go back some years, doing music. I kind of stopped for a minute. He kept going, and so he's much more successful at this point than I am.
Stop it.
But I remember back when we was on the Twitter mixtape, when I first got introduced to you, in like the early 2000, might have been 2011, 12, something like that. Your artist name was at just Chris. So you didn't go by Kunle then. I knew you as Chris, and then later on knew you as Kunle, and I know now your artist name is Love Kunle. And so I'm interested to know in terms from so you said you started embracing your Nigerian name at 17, but artistically you were still going by just Chris. And so I'm wondering how, why did you not go by Kunle then? Was it to be more accepted in hip hop? Was it for marketing purposes? I know a lot of people do that with their names so that it'll just market them better, that kind of thing. So that's my first question. And then secondly, what was your experiences, I guess, in growing up in a Nigerian household, and and this is kind of to everybody really, you all's I guess narratives or discussions around African Americans, right? Like, were you all kind of?
I'm curious about that too.
Yeah, like what was because you have some people who come from non-Black American families who kind of have an understanding, have a Pan-African point of view, and so they understand the diaspora, they understand white supremacy, they understand colonization and all of that, and so they have a different narrative and a way in which they discuss Black Americans than other non-Black American families. And I've had some of my non-Black American friends say, "Oh yeah, we was definitely told to stay away from y'all lazy, y'all this, y'all that." So I would love for you to talk about that, Kunle, and then at some point, Christina and Elizabeth, maybe you could speak to that second part as well, because I don't know if y'all
okay. Yeah, so with the music part, it was more so from a marketing perspective. Chris, I started off when I was much younger as going by Big Chris, and then I went to just Chris because I lost weight. So I started going by just Chris Wallace. Yeah, and then eventually I went by Kunle. The reason why I didn't want to go by Kunle is because I knew I didn't make traditional Nigerian music, and I didn't want to be identified as a Nigerian artist. It really wasn't until Wale came out. Wale was the one who kind of pushed me in the direction of going towards Kunle, but I couldn't figure out how to market myself so that Kunle made sense, because there are a million different artists in Nigeria named Kunle, which is why I added the I. I saw somebody spell it with an I one time, like they didn't know how to spell my name and they spelled it with the I at the end because they thought that's how it sounded phonetically or how it was spelled. And I thought it looked really dope, and I thought that like it had like a creative spin to it. and that's how.
I thought that was your real name. Like,
I did
it's
too.
not it's the EI.
No, there's no I on Kunle in like my government.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that's how the music part went. As far as living in a American household, so with my family, because my family has like we've like lived in the same household, like cousins and aunties and all of that. They've always been very aware of my mother and my mother understanding, like knowing that my mother was American. It wasn't until we moved to Atlanta. We moved to Atlanta that
It's a whole
I'm
we better not do that episode in person. 'Cause this gonna be some bold strong.
Ready. Atlanta is about the boat.
It's about to get ugly.
About the boat.
I felt that too.
It wasn't until we moved to Atlanta when they started going to like a Nigerian church. And that because my mother has really embraced the culture, people didn't even know that she wasn't Nigerian. Okay. So they would talk around her like they would talk around any other Nigerian and just blasting Americans. And so she would never, because my mother's a non-confrontational person, especially because, you know, those are really my father's people. She wouldn't really say much even to my father, but she would say it to me because I'm from Chicago and I am very confrontational. It was nothing for me to be like, excuse me, I don't know if y'all realize my mother is American and what y'all not finna do. I'm half American, to be clear. Like, so what y'all not gonna do is keep talking, but like Nigerians do not have in the last, things have changed recently, but in the last, 15, 20 years, Nigerians don't have a real appreciation for the struggles that Black Americans have done to make sure that they can actually succeed in this country. And so having those type of conversations has helped like my father's generation understand why their perspective of Black Americans is so off, like how they feel like they're lazy and all of that. It's like they don't have a real understanding, or they didn't have a real understanding of what Black Americans have gone through, because yo Nigerian ass could have never been a doctor in this country if not for the Black Americans that did what they did. So understanding that now, that's kind of how like the relationship between Black Americans and Nigerians in my household works now, versus like 20 years ago. But it's just people are a lot more aware of their surroundings. Because Nigerians will blast Americans in a quick second until you put them in check.
And it reminds me a lot of what you were saying, Christina, about your experience with Mexicans, and just how we will, like, there's levels to it, right? Like it's like whiteness is the ultimate goal, and everyone tries to kind of like step themselves a little bit closer, and a little bit closer, and or a little bit further than, I think it's like white and then African American, and then everybody else kind of just trickles in the middle. And the closer they can kind of get to whiteness and the further they can get to Blackness is how they try to like self-identify, or we try to self-identify, I think, as a colored people who have an attachment or some kind of attachment to another culture, right? So it's like, although we may be Black aesthetically, if we can identify with another culture, another country, somehow we feel like we're better than African Americans because we have this place that we can call our own. And then we also have this, we don't share the history of slavery. And so that just inherently makes us better, which is so problematic. And I think that as children, even, we can be raised to feel like we're exceptional for that reason. Like you might be Black, but you're not African American. So don't be out in the streets acting any which way, you know? And so it's really sad that that's like the benchmark that is kind of like, you have to be better than this class of people who, it's just like if you forget the history, if you just completely ignore the reality, the systemic oppression that continues to this day, it's even then that's like a completely flawed way of thinking. But like what you said, Kalani, about like, if not for the experience and the struggle and the fight of African Americans, like we would have no footing here, you know?
So what were those some of the messages you received through your Ethiopian community, that like, because you weren't Black American, at least you were a little bit better, and we weren't enslaved, so we don't identify with that? Those That's what you heard growing up?
Yeah, not the enslaved piece as much, but just not being African American, right? So there's like this subculture in America of like how the media will portray African Americans, or how, you know, poverty or struggle is often just directly tied to being Black. And so there's no other way to be Black outside of that. So you can't come to America and not do well in school. And there's like tangential examples of what they would use to kind of justify the rationale, right? Like, oh, look at the prison population. Like, it's almost entirely Black men or Black women. Like, therefore, they have to be inherently more criminal. And then you take a step back, and as you're getting educated, then you educate your parents who have this way of thinking because they were also educated by the system that profits and is enriched in many ways by continuing to feed us these lies about each other. So if we continue to separate ourselves and make ourselves feel like we're better than another group of people, then, you know, the infighting continues. So then there's never any unity and never any progress as a result of that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot. I had faces over here while y'all was talking, because just the inherent anti-Blackness and all of that is like sometimes, you know, I know no fault to anybody here, but sometimes it's just hard to stomach that, right? And particularly with the experiences that Black Americans have been through. And I think it's remiss, we would be wrong and it would be disingenuous to say that Black people throughout the diaspora, right, have experienced inherent harm due to these white supremacist ideals. But obviously I'm Black American. And so I'm a product of the crack era, you know, that was heavy in my community at the time. You know, I've seen countless people who have lost their lives either to the prison system or just to crack itself. And all of that, right, like comes with me. Like I bring that to the table with my Blackness, but also along like these shifting lines of reimagining the world for Black people and what does liberation really look like for Black people. And it always is just so like gut-wrenching to me because I don't envision, as a Black American, I don't envision liberation for Black people without including the diaspora, right? Like that's just not a thing for me. But at the same time, like I'm so protective and so just want to hold close Black Americans because I see, I have a lot of friends who are throughout the diaspora. I've traveled to the continent, you know, only on one occasion. I've been to Mexico studying the Black experience and the way that Black people just throughout the diaspora, a lot of people just turn their nose at Black Americans is just really hard for me to stomach, right? And even here in this country, the way, like I see it even in the way we turn our nose, people throughout the rest of the country to Black Southerners, right? And it kind of like takes me back to like, so when the election was going on and like Georgia was still like in contention, right? The way people just started going on social media was blasting like, oh, look what y'all did, Georgia can't. And I was like, first of all, the voting process ain't even done and y'all coming for Black people in Georgia's neck like this, like, come on. And then the result ended up being what it was. You know, whatever anybody's, you know, if voting is your form of liberation or whether it's not, it was still just this inherent anti-Blackness and this constant display of the way we treat Black Southerners, right? Particularly, but the way we treat Black Americans and this disdain is so inherently rooted in this anti-Blackness. And for me, like I said, I grew up Black American. And so that wasn't like, we weren't having those conversations. We were those people, right? Like we were those people that were kind of walking through those struggles. I don't know. It's a lot for me to hear that.
I just want to say, like, I really didn't know that there was so much anti-Blackness because until I went up to Boston and I was around more different, I guess I would say different types of Blacks, because I didn't know people had so much to say about Black Americans because I'm born and raised in Atlanta. And so many of us are Black Americans. So many of the people in my school, I went to a Black school. I just didn't know that there was so much of that. And I was really disheartened to hear and to to hear about the anti-Blackness from other Black people, from Caribbean folks, Africans would say about Black Americans. I was just like, wow, this is really disheartening. And so to something that you said, Kunle, and I would be really curious to hear what both Elizabeth and Kunle have to say about this, you know, Black people wanting to pursue their heritage beyond the slave ship, right? So even John saying that the earliest they can go is South Carolina. And there is this movement towards Black people, Black Americans trying to find their roots. What do you all feel about how like Black Americans are trying to just identify? Because I feel like in different ways, they are trying to bring out those dashikis. They are trying to do whatever they can to just bring that connection. I remember reading an article where they were like, Black people wearing, like Black Americans wearing dashikis is appropriation. And I was like, what? This is crazy to me. But at the same time, I understood what they were saying because it's just like the patterns come from a specific tribe and you need to have done the research. But then it's just like how much research you got to do to try to have to just try to like satiate that small desire to feel connection to the motherland, you know? But I'm curious, like, how do you all feel about Black people trying to connect back to Africa, connect back to their roots, and then the concept of being more African or being more Black than somebody else, because you all are more from the motherland. And it's just like, do you feel more African? Do you feel like you get to give permission to Black people to actually hold in their African culture? What were you gonna say, John?
I was just gonna come in. I know this is the one where we let the guests talk more, so I'm gonna just say this real quick. I'm so glad you asked that question because me and a friend of mine who's Nigerian, Kunle, by the way, we were in a conversation with some other people, and he said something about, well, I'm the only real African in this group. And I got offended, right? Because I'm like, well, I feel like I'm African, but I mean, I am African American. And we had a whole conversation. I didn't hold it against him, but I later on told him like I had a slight tinge because he knows, you know, we've been friends for a long time, so he knows how I feel. And so when he said, well, I'm the only real African, and I remember visiting Tanzania one time, and it was this white woman who she was from South Africa. She was Afrikaan. And she said, well, I remember she made some comment about to the Black Americans in the group that she was more African than all of us. And I remember I was really upset with her because she was white. And this is my homeboy. So I'm like, you know, I still got love for you, but you a white woman. You ain't got, and I remember checking her.
And at best a colonizer.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Or at worst.
So you don't tell me you more African than me
just because you're from Africa, you gotta act
and kidnap damn Sarah Bartman and took her to Europe and traced her all around France. Don't play with me. Don't play with me. You understand what I'm saying? Don't tell me you're more African than me just because your people got here in the early part of the 20th century and my people was here long before. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, I say that to say, because I won't take up too much time. I'm glad you asked that question because I kind of I get a twinge when I hear people say that, and then it takes me like 2 seconds to be like, you know what? They have a different perspective than me when people say like, I'm not African or you're not a real African or whatever. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts, even if you do say I'm not a real African.
Yeah, I just want to hear what's your actual perspective, not just because you own this podcast.
I think it's multi-layered. I think on one hand, they've made it a competition so that we continue to fight each other instead of identifying within ourselves the things that feel natural to us, right? Like, you know, so you can see someone and say like, oh, you know, your facial features resemble someone from Ghana. Your facial features resemble someone from Northern Ethiopia, Southern Ethiopia. Like those are the things that I think would build community if we could just help cultivate a sense of like unity. And on the other hand, I think even I had purchased a few dashikis and I haven't like Ethiopian, like there's no dashikis in the Ethiopian like clothing realm. And I felt weird doing it because I'm like, am I just like buying into this because I like the look? Do I really have any kind of like stake in wearing this if I don't know what it represents? And like, am I commodifying something? Am I commodifying someone else's culture? And I think it's a fine line of appreciating it versus just like stripping it of its importance and its significance. Like if I saw like Ethiopian dresses just like sold at J. Crew, which they tried to do, I felt some type of way because I'm like, how dare you? You know, like this is representative of our culture. If you're doing it to appreciate the culture and to be a part of it, and you trace it back and you source it with, you know, Ethiopian artists and artisans, sure, but don't do it to sell it at J. Crew. No.
And either way, it would feel weird to see a Becky walking around in a dashiki. I don't know how much she appreciates.
Say that.
It just feels weird. It just feels weird. But yeah. Mr. Silent over there. Okay.
I have
toxic.
Yeah. I have very, very similar opinions. Just because I've seen, so like Beyonce got a lot of heat for her Black is King situation because she took a lot from African cultures. But there's like people like John, right? So people like John, I feel like they have an appreciation for Africa and they want to learn about Africa because they realize, like, how do I say this? So okay, so like John was saying, like he doesn't know like where his people come from past a certain length, right? So he's just like looking at Africa in general. Like, I know I'm from here. I don't know exactly where I'm from. I know I'm from, and he has an appreciation for African culture in general. Those people I appreciate. Those people, you want to wear dashiki, you want to wear ankara, whatever you want to wear, cool, because you have an appreciation for the culture. Then there's other people, because Africa is hot right now, it's a hot topic. You know, they're just going online and looking for, you know, what's a dashiki like? You know, I want to wear, you know, Ghanaian print or whatever because it's cool right now. It's the end thing, and that to me feels like appropriation, and that I'm not here for.
I have a question. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine.
So I wonder, like, if we as Africans, like, how much can we be gatekeepers of something we were born into, and we have the privilege of knowing that we were born there, and like our African American brothers and sisters, like, were they? It was just like a question of geography, no? Like, just the same way that Black Americans, like, I feel when we come here, more or less, right? Like, with minus the kind of bullying that some of us might have experienced for not being American enough. Like, where does that kind of divide break down? You know, like, can we really be gatekeepers of a culture that we had the privilege of being born into, at the exclusion of other people who look like us, who, you know, if their mom had just taken a plane ride over and given birth to them there, they would also be African, right? Like, we're African because we were born there, and yes, we have some of the cultural kind of attachments to it, but does that make sense?
Well, yeah, even in the same way, I think that, like, what John was saying about how, like, the white woman from South Africa he says that she's more African. I don't like subscribe to that. Yeah. So like I go, for me personally, I go based off heritage. So I don't, like, if I'm Black, like me right now, like if I had a child in Korea right now, Koreans are not looking at that person as Korean. So when I look at Black Americans, I look at you as African because I recognize that somewhere down the line you're from Africa. To the same extent, one, I have a personal connection or a personal history to how Black Americans treated me as a youth that kind of takes away or to kind of adds to my personal interactions with Black Americans. And then on the other end, I recognize that there are Black Americans out here who just don't care for culture. Like, I have no problem with people wanting to know more about Africa, especially Black people. Not only Black people, to be honest. I could care less if white people want to know about African history. But I appreciate when people like hit me up and are like, you know, I want to learn this about Nigeria. Do you know this, that, that, or the other? Like, I appreciate those type of conversations. And I guess maybe it is a little arrogant of me to feel like I could be a gatekeeper. But I think I'm almost at the point where, like, I'm trying to protect my culture, because there are so many vultures that will literally try and pick apart where you're from, where your people are from, for their own selfish gain. And I mean, I would be like that with Chicago, like people who, like, there's a play again, Atlanta. There's a place in Atlanta right now that
Keep coming for Atlanta next.
Oh, we about to
gotta stay here.
I'm gonna circle back.
There's a Harold's Chicken. Like, Harold's Chicken is like a famous Chicago chicken spot, and there's a Harold's Chicken here in Atlanta that serves mild sauce, which is Chicago sauce. They serve mild sauce in that Harold's, and it don't taste anything like Chicago mild sauce. And that pisses me off. I've never gone to that Harold's because it pisses me off that you're taking from my Chicago culture and you're not representing it correctly. You did it because Chicago, like, that spot is hot. You turn it into like a bar. Like, it's a mom and pop's hole in the wall type shop. And y'all turn it into like a lounge hookah type joint. Like, it's like you're not appreciating the culture that it comes from. Like, you're making it a monetization type situation. And like, that's where I like draw the line. Like, and so that's like universal for me. Like, it's not just about being African and being Nigerian. Just in general, when you're taking from a culture that you don't actually appreciate and just trying to capitalize off of something that's hot, that's where I draw the line of being a gatekeeper.
Fair enough.
But then, like, when do you know? So it's just like, if you see two Black people walking towards you and both of them have on the same dashiki, how do you interact with them? How do you say, I can tell this brother knows something about something? And then the other one is like, you're a misappropriating ass nigga. Like, what's the difference?
Because one is John and one is not.
Ain't a real nigga if you ain't me. If you ain't me, you ain't a real nigga. Straight up.
I'm just like, in our interactions, when do we have those moments where somebody can give enough of a resume or a background to be able to say, this is who I am and this is where I'm coming from, so this justifies things, versus a phenotype? So we all know, if we did see a Becky walking around with a dashiki, we're like, no relevance. And at the same time, though, we're like, we don't know where she came from. She could have had Black parents. She could have had African parents. Maybe she's just trying to appreciate her culture. Like, I remember seeing this, I don't know if y'all saw the Voices of Fire, not a great document, not a great thing on Netflix, but there was one of the women in the competition, it was a singing competition. She was white. She was adopted by a Native American family, and even by a Native American, and she was adopted by a Native American family. So she lived, I don't know if she lived on a reservation, but either way, I remember early on, she was like wearing braids and stuff. And I was like, why is this white girl wearing braids like this? And then there was one point where her tribe, they wanted to like honor her for being in the competition. So they gave her this jewelry and they gave her all this stuff. And so she actually wore it for one of their performances. And if I had not known her history and her story, I would have been like, here's this white girl wearing all of this Native jewelry and stuff. And it's just like, I'm imagining that she might not have any connection to it, but it's just like, this is her story. So it's just like, where do we actually get off being gatekeepers or like questioning people, or like, is it a case-by-case situation? Of course, I have no respect for the Kardashians. And so I feel like they have completely like misappropriated all kind of stuff. So I'm just like, I know you don't respect this because of the way that you talk about it. And so, but I don't know. I feel like we toe the line of being the very, like, it's just like, who is the identity police? And yet, like you said, Kunle, it's like, but there's something to honoring it and protecting it and saying, I want to protect this. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, I'm going to want to, say like, no, or be able to say, well, I have the right to ask questions because I want to protect this. And I don't just want like the things that are sacred to my people, to my culture, to be just commodified all over the place.
I think you protect it from an enemy.
Oh, say what? Elizabeth?
Oh, you protect it from an enemy, right? Like, so if I identify you as an enemy to my culture and to my progress and to my people, then I protect it from you. But I think the problem is we perceive others who look like us as enemies simply because they don't hold the kind of language access, they don't hold the birthright access that we've been fortunate enough to have, right? And the enemies are the people who want to divide and conquer and destroy, right? But not other people who didn't have the chance to be born where we were. And not to say that, because I think we can all, I would say that like ideally everyone would have been, no one would have experienced slavery, and no one would have been forcibly removed from their culture and their country, right? So that trauma and that form of aggression, had that not been there, we would all have been one in the first place, right? So I don't know. I think this conversation is actually very clarifying for me. Like I said, Ethiopia is going through a lot of ethnic division and ethnic warfare. And as a result, you're able to see, like, you know, we as on the face of it, we're all Black, right? And so we have the common enemy of racism. And in Ethiopia, we all look different, right? And nothing about us is uniform in terms of what divides us. You can't really see it. But to be divided by culture, and I mean to be divided by language and say, oh, you're different, I'm better than you because I speak a different language or because I'm from a different region, just shows the insidious nature of racism and how far it will go to continue to divide and to make sure that we never have the unity that will actually give us the progress we need. So to answer your question, I think we protect it from the enemy and not from each other. And the enemy wants us to think that we, in and of ourselves, are the enemies of each other. So your interest and your desire to wear the dashiki, by all means, because I don't own it, or the Ethiopian clothing, like I don't own it. And your interest in reconnecting with your heritage is honorable. And, you know, like if we can help each other along the path, we should, right? Because I'm sure I've met other people who know much more about Ethiopia than I will ever know, you know?
And I think there's this conversation is always a struggle for me, because part of my journey through Black identity has been having to grapple with and I'm gonna be very honest, my lack of connection to, or be able to kind of trace my roots back to the continent, but an absolute desire to do so, because at heart, right, who I am is a Pan-Africanist, and I believe in the unity of the diaspora. But it's also always a struggle. Like there's so much. So to sit here and act like, and I'm not saying that this is what we're doing, but just generally speaking, to sit here and act as if the only culture that is being taken is from the continent, as if Black American culture isn't being commodified and taken and used all over the world, right? And very specifically poor Black people, right? And so I think it's disingenuous to only talk about culture and not include that as Black Americans, right? Our culture is being taken at these enormous rates, and people, all types of people, not just Black people, but all types of people are being able to commodify and participate in capitalistic nature with this, right? And so I think there needs to generally be a better some grace given, right? And some understanding of Black people, of saying that, you know, there is this disruption, but through that disruption, right? Like we often talk about slavery, and sometimes I get frustrated how we flame slavery. It was like, oh, did this happen? We shouldn't just talk about this. We need to talk about this, because we need to uplift and hold high what our ancestors not only were able to come through, but what they were able to provide. And this whole culture that has been begotten because of the slave, right, needs to be appreciated and needs to be respected. And it is that culture that is being commodified all over. And so we can't have this conversation of, you know, people borrowing or taking or stealing from subcultures without really acknowledging that that is being done with Black Americans.
That's true.
So, yeah.
Very true. Thank you for that.
I was just gonna say that I agree. And I think maybe that I'm learning a lot from this conversation, because I think that I'm a no new friends type of nigga. So if I don't see, if I don't know you personally, like if I didn't know John personally, I would think that he's trying to appropriate my culture. And I think that a lot of what Christina said is accurate. Like there is a lot that's taken from Black, and me being American and African, like I understand, you know, both sides of that. Like I think that because I identify more with Nigerian, I tend to weigh more on that side. But like, you know, there's a lot that Black Americans have, a lot that's stolen from Black American culture that, I don't know. I think my own personal stance, and you know, this is something that I'll probably need to work on. But I think my own personal stance comes from my childhood and how I was treated by Black Americans. Even though I even now, like I have conversations where, you know, like Black Americans will tell Africans that you're not Black, like you don't really get to sit at this table and have these conversations because you don't really understand the experience. And to an extent, I understand it because, again, I understand both sides. Like, I understand the negative views that Africans have against Americans just as much as I understand the negative views that Black Americans have against Africans. So while I recognize it, I think that it's just something that I have to work on within myself, honestly, because I really don't care to see like my culture being appropriated, especially for America. And like, I have an issue with America, honestly. If my family didn't live here, I would have been gone. So it's like to see my, like, it would be different if Ghana was an appropriating culture. But like the feelings that I have towards America, let me be very clear. I do not care what you're trying to do. Like, I don't care how good your intents are. If you are white and you are wearing African clothing, I do have a problem with that. That will never change. With Black people, it's a little different. But with white people, like, I'm gonna rant. So I'm just gonna stop there. But like, because I could go on with that. But I'm appreciative of this conversation because I'm learning a lot, like, even from how I view things on my own.
Okay, there was so much that we just covered, and I feel like this is part 2, and we could go up to part 15, and we were just really just getting into the conversation. There's so much.
Yo, Amber, real quick, can I just can I do like a quick commercial break and just play a song that kind of reminds me of this moment?
Please do it.
Yes.
Black on black on black on black, is that one? I love that one. Put it closer to the mic.
Have y'all heard this song?
You have to keep going. Oh yes, I know that part.
That one hard,
bro. You off beat.
Yo,
you off beat.
I've been playing this all week. I don't know what it is about it. That song just been speaking to me, dog. That ain't gonna burn no boy. Oh, speaking of which, oh my goodness. Okay, I know we about to segue into the takeout boxes real quick, but 2 things. Okay, so this question is for Christina and for Elizabeth. Music. Elizabeth, being of Ethiopian descent, how do you feel about particularly Jamaicans, people who are considered to be Caribbean, and African Americans subscribing to the principles and the religious, some people would say religious and social ideas of His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie? I know that that story is extremely significant to Black people, particularly people who are considered pro-Black, Pan-African, whatever. And so, but at the same time, some people may argue that that's, maybe an Ethiopian person might argue that that's appropriation. I never looked at it that way because particularly in college, I was also inspired by a lot of his teachings. I was inspired by the Rastafarian movement. And so I was just curious as to that. And then Christina, being of Mexican descent, I've always wondered, do Mexicans or people who are Latinx, do they consider the Migos cultural appropriating? Because I'm like, if you think about it, the Migos, that's not Black, that's Amigos, that's them, you know what I'm saying? I was like, is that appropriation? Should we not be bumping, you know what I'm saying?
I've never thought of that before in my life.
Is that not true though? Is it not true though? So I really feel like to show respect to Che Guevara, to show respect to Cesar Chavez, you know what I'm saying, and J-Lo, maybe I shouldn't be bumping the me.
I'm about to get up. No, he did not.
Never.
J-Lo.
J-Lo.
though.
You can chill.
Queen of appropriating Black culture.
We have to put J-Lo in there.
What?
Because J-Lo also said that it's okay for her to say the N-word. So, you know, it's
J-Lo couldn't catch
balancing.
his hand.
She was the prophet.
She used to say the N-word in her song with Ja Rule.
Wrong again.
She said it and she was out there with Ja Rule.
She did
We
say the
don't.
N-word in that song.
Yes,
She did say
and
that.
we don't give love and respect to J-Lo. No, the
Uh,
queen made an entire career off appropriating Black women. Absolutely
yeah.
She set the roadmap for the Kardashians.
not.
That's what
Right, right.
So yeah, so I'm just interested to know what, you know, do y'all consider that appropriation? You know what I'm saying?
Okay, which question first? I don't know. Should we just hurry up, do this Migos one? And then go to that?
Get that one out there.
Listen, I'll make it quick. As I have said, I don't think that I've never heard anybody say that about the Migos ever in my life. And I will reiterate a comment, you know, kind of a statement earlier that Black American culture, particularly through entertainment, is so valued, right? And there's something to be gained from people who kind of align themselves with that. So that is not anything that I have ever heard in my life. I'm gonna leave it at that.
I think what you asked about the Jamaicans and Rastafarian culture, I think it's beautiful. I had a friend when I was living in London who grew up in Ethiopia, but her family, both her parents are Jamaican. And so they both identify as Ethiopian. They speak Ethiopian, Amharic fluently. And it's like, it's like, if we could all just be so unified, right? Like if you, like Black people who, like just the same way when we come here, Black people embrace and support us as a culture. I think we, as a people, when people come to Ethiopia with love and respect and a desire to connect with their culture, why not? It's beautiful.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And now we are at our takeout boxes section. This is where we just say, what are our major takeaways from this conversation? Anyone feel free to start.
There's so much. I'm still kind of stuck on like the idea of commodity and economic, like financial, like the financial exchange that comes along with culture and cultural appropriation. I guess I'm thinking not only when it comes to dashikis and other expressions of culture, but I'm also thinking about who gets to claim reparations, and how
talk about that,
and how so much of identity just becomes exchanged in like a capitalistic market, and like who gets to claim it and who doesn't, like who gets legitimacy based on like this economic measure. And I was trying to look up, there's this concept by super deep thinker Orlando Patterson, called, like the concept is called natal alienation. And the idea is that Black folks, when we were forcibly moved from Africa, we experienced natal alienation, which is like natal in terms of like,
wow, I love that.
What is natal? Like that's like
the birth, yeah.
Birth, yeah. So we experienced like a natal alienation, being separated and disconnected from our homeland, our culture, our people, just like anything that is bestowed upon you in birth, like we were disconnected from. But there's a part to this concept of natal alienation that also has to do with commodity. It's like once you've experienced that separation, like commodification, like the door to commodification is opened. So it's just making me think about how commodity and economics and capitalism all kind of influence who gets to claim, who gets to claim certain identities. So I'm just thinking about that a lot. And also thinking about like the complexity of gatekeeping, because gatekeeping, I think, pushes back against commodity and capitalism in a certain way, and it's important, but it's also complicated because who gets to gatekeep and who gets to come in the door and all that stuff. Sorry to make it more academic than street.
No, that's what we're here
Oh,
for.
that's really good.
That's fine.
I need to look up some words. Need a dictionary.
Goodbye, John.
I can go. And then of course all of our co-hosts, please too, our guests. I really can just say I'm just super grateful for this conversation because it's two things I'm left with. One, it's just cultural humility. Like there's always more to learn about anyone's experience. And I'm not going to sit here and think I know it all ever. I'm not going to say I know it all about the Black experience because I've had one type of Black experience. And honestly, I really feel hurt for like, from what I'm hearing from all of our guests, the experience that you had growing up, just really being bullied for your identity, and specifically for Elizabeth and Kunle, bullied by Black Americans or other Black people about being African. And I'm just like, that to me is just, I'm just hurt for that, because it's just like, especially for you, Kunle, the way that you kind of talk about like these people, it's just like, there's still something that feels like it's kind of there for you, that it's just like, that was really traumatizing. And why would it not be? It's like, as a child, you will get traumatized by being bullied because you are other in some kind of way. And it's just like, that doesn't leave fast. And it's like, it can still be there for many, many years. It's like, you're still gonna be dealing with it. And not to say like you like some, I'm not trying to say like you wounded and broken. I'm just saying like, it's in us. It's just like being a child and whatever was there, it is so much with that. And I just feel hurt for that, and for all of the people who've ever experienced that in childhood and growing up and being, being at, it's just the separation between all the types of Black. And I remember hearing the phrase African booty scratcher back in the day and not thinking of it at all, because I don't know, it didn't occur to me, but because African was kind of different, and like how Black Americans did sometimes kind of like speak in jest about African ways of being. And even now, I really hate even saying African culture as though that's one thing. And it's just like, it's so many different countries and ethnicities and cultures within Africa. To even say African culture is just like, that is not sufficient of a term at all. And it's just, so it's just like cultural humility is something that I'm sitting with, and I'm going to continue to sit with and feel like, okay, I want to learn more about my people, and also honor the fact that I don't know enough and there's always something to learn. And then the other thing is I'm still stuck on the US Virgin Islands and the British Virgin Islands. And I'm just like, I need a map. I need another map. And so I'm just,
it's not a map. It's like, you need a historical, like a dated map. Like when was this who's?
I need something completely different. Like my little Africa map is not enough. I already knew that, but just like, I know that there's a term called emappancy, where it's just like based on the way that maps were formed, we learn certain things about the world and come to different understandings about the world. And one is just that I feel like I just didn't, and I still don't have enough of appreciation for how Brazil was like the main port for slaves even, and how there's so many Black people, so many Africans who were in Brazil and all of the struggles that they have had, and really thinking about like the entire Caribbean, the entirety of North America to South America, and the impact on the slave trade and all the descendants of Africans who are across the whole thing. Like, I don't feel like I have had enough of appreciation for that, because I've kind of like, been very America-centric, like, US centric, and it's like cultural humility, and I need to get some more maps that are connected to history in some kind of way. It's just, I just really appreciate this whole conversation. So thank you all.
Yeah, I think my takeout box, it kind of comes from what Kunle was saying, because I kind of came into the conversation again kind of thinking, people of African descent should accept African Americans, and there should be, we're all one and Pan-African and blah blah blah. And I think after listening to these conversations, I'm like, well, yeah, I understand now. Like, if you have this group that's calling you African booty scratcher, or who are not accepting towards you, even though they also don't feel accepted from that same group, then they're going to feel some kind of way. And, kind of what Elizabeth said, and I like how she reframed this notion of the enemy, But it's really whiteness that has divided us. And I can understand now what Kunle was kind of saying, not only from an international perspective, but even from a regional perspective. Like, we want to protect Nigerian culture. I want to protect Nigerian culture. I want to protect Chicago culture. You know what I'm saying? So all of us are trying to protect all of this stuff from each other when it wasn't each other that exploited it. You know what I'm saying? This is stuff that we've been taught, but now we're using it to kind of like say Black Americans are like, nah, we don't want y'all, you know, participating in trap music, or well, hip hop is really Black American. And then, you know, certain African cultures may say, well, dashikis are us, you know, and that's African and that's not African American or whatever. And it's like, I get it now. Like, I shouldn't be so quick to cast out, you know, a person of Caribbean descent or of African descent if they're not as quick to accept me, because you know, they are just trying to protect things that have been taken and exploited and eradicated, you know, and unearthed from their culture and used against them or commodified in a way that has not, you know, reproduced, you know, positivity and reproduced advancement in, you know, among their own people. You know what I'm saying? And so I get that now. You know what I'm saying? Like, I understand that now. And I wish we would have had time to even go into that regional part, because the way Christina talked about, like, even understanding, you know, not just, you know, the look of how Black Americans in general are viewed, but particularly those from the South, right? The slower ones, the ones that are, you know, huh? And we gonna do a whole nother but I think that, and I know we joke about it, but I think that's really interesting, right? Because yeah, you do have, and then even among the Southerners, the urban Southerners versus the rural Southerners. So somebody from Atlanta versus somebody from like Albany, you know what I'm saying? Or like Huntsville, or you know, people from someone from Huntsville, someone from Mobile or something. So it's just so many like nuances and subsects of our own culture that I think sometimes you know, there is this intraracial tension that, you know, that we have to, you know, find ways to kind of pick apart and figure out why does this exist, and have even more of these conversations, because it's so much deeper than just Black American, non-Black Americans. You know what I'm saying? We can go on for another 2-3 hours, you know, talking about this thing. So, but I think that was definitely the thing I took away, is I need to be more patient with my non-Black American brothers and sisters, because for many of them, it's not an affront on me. It's really just a protection of who they are and where they're from. And so that was my takeaway for sure.
I'll piggyback off of that because I think I have similar sentiments. There's definitely a continued and renewed gain and appreciation for the diaspora through this conversation. And I think the thing that also is sitting with me is that, you know, we're kind of going around and like naming these harms that have been done to Black people throughout the diaspora, and really need to name that this is white supremacy that has created these divides. And so what does reimagining these relationships, right? And building community, not just here, but throughout the diaspora kind of look like? And so that's gonna sit with me.
For me, I'm reminded of something. I have a public health background, and something that we often spoke about and was Black maternal mortality rates. And when I was pregnant with my daughters, it just really struck home that the experience of racism in this country has measurable impacts on a woman's likelihood of delivering a full-term healthy baby. And so when we think about, when I think about myself and my identity, like I can say that I'm Ethiopian, but the experience of racism in this country has unified me with my African-American sisters in this experience. It just takes one generation of living in this country for our bodies to deteriorate enough to have a different childbearing experience than white women in this country. So I think there's an undeniable reality that racism impacts all of us, whether or not we're one generation removed from Africa or many generations removed from Africa. And so if we continue to kind of name our enemy and collide against that enemy instead of each other, I think that's really the only way forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the biggest thing that I've taken away from this is that the common enemy is the white supremacy. I still have to work within myself, because, like I said, I'm protective of everything. I'm protective of my mother against my father. Like, I'm protective of everybody. Like, I'm a protective person. So I think that it takes some understanding, and just understanding in how both cultures that I'm comprised of work. But yeah, I really did appreciate this conversation, because honestly, I've taken away a lot more than I thought I would have. I thought I was going to give a lot. I didn't realize how much I was going to take away from it. Because it's true. Like, and I honestly hope that I can identify and adapt the way that Elizabeth thinks. Just in like this, who is the enemy, essentially. Because I love Black people. And even though, Caribbeans, I might joke around, hey, it's Africa versus everybody, or it's, West Africans versus Africans, West Indians versus Africans, whatever the case may be. Like, I might joke around a lot, but in general, I really do love Black people. And I think that if I'm honest about that, then I need to start showing more understanding to the plights of different sections of people.
Into it.
I really appreciated your vulnerability and your honesty about growing up. I think both you and Christina in sharing that, the kind of trauma that is experienced in that. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you guys for having us on. I think this was really good conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for coming. This is really enlightened me in so many ways. And as Christina was saying, and as Christina said, and as I feel like Elizabeth gave the language to us, like, who is the enemy? The common enemy is Black. This is not about Black on Black nothing. This is, we know who the enemy actually is, and it is white supremacy culture, systemic racism, all of that. And any behavior that comes from Black people against other Black people is because of that. More than likely, 9 times out of 9, more than likely. And so I do feel like that's so important. And because one thing Kunle said is, I love Black people. We love Black people. We all love Black people. That's the point. This is about Black love. This is about Black love. So thank you all for coming. Johnny, you want to close us out?
Man, this was phenomenal. I'm just so blessed. Just want to make sure our hearts and minds are clear.
All hearts and minds are clear.
Everybody good? Cool. Yo, it's been another episode of Street Academy Podcast, where we keep one foot in the academy and one foot in the street. I want to give each of the guests an opportunity to give their handles, talk about what you're doing, what you got going on, websites, projects, whatever. This is your time to go ahead and talk about that. So we can go to Christina, Kunle, and then Elizabeth. And then we'll go ahead and close out.
All right, y'all. So my handle on Twitter, Instagram is Teena Foster, Teena Foster. And I'm working on a lot of different things, so that'll be popping up soon. So I'll just wait to kind of highlight that when it comes. So yeah.
What do you do, Christina? I didn't get that.
So I'm actually an educator / working on some organizing here in the city. So.
Nice.
And momming it up. So.
So yeah, your boy Plantain Poppy. My handle is Love Kunle. I don't really care too much about my personal page. My business page is Freed Up Creative. As most of you know, Freed Up Creative is a platform for Black businesses and Black creatives. And so we have just launched a new project called the Greenwood Exchange, which will be essentially a Black marketplace for Black brands, Black consumers, Black businesses, Black products, Black services. So yeah, I'm very excited about that. We're still working on funding, but we just started that project last month. So yeah, follow us for updates and all of that. On a personal side, I make music. I'm working on my next album called Introversion. And that is me. Oh, and I'm also married to Jackie. So, working on being a better husband every day. That good stuff.
Hey.
Black love.
Love it.
So I am a mom full-time, but I am also a writer. You can find my writing at elizabethasefa.com. My last name is spelled Asefa. And my Instagram handle is probably somewhere on my website. I don't know it by heart, but my website, that's elizabethasefa.com. Yeah.
Nice. And Cooley, I just want to say I've been wearing the hoodie.
Me too.
Just like around, and folks been asking. They was like, "Yo, what is that? Like, what are those dates?"
Yeah.
I had to remember, I was like, I know one of them was like Tulsa, and then one of them was something like that. So anyway, I just want to let you know the streets is talking. They ready. The hood ready for the release, baby.
Facts.
My name is
Appreciate
John.
y'all.
You can find me at J Paul Grant, Instagram, www.jpaulgrant.com. My website, and Facebook, JAY space P space GE for Facebook, and yeah, that's what I am.
My name is Amber Camila. I'm not active for real on social media, but if you would like, it's at Amber Camila on Instagram. But the project that I am starting that I really do, that is going to come, I've been working on it for a while, is Relearn Anything. It used to be Relearn Everything, but it's at Relearn Anything on Instagram. Do follow it. There will be something there soon.
And I am at Jackie Demission on all of the things.
Excellent.
All right. Well, it's been another episode, y'all. Street Academy Podcast. Thank y'all for joining us. Follow us at Street Academy Podcast. It's spelled the way that you would think it would be spelled. We love y'all. Peace out.
Bye.
Peace out. 8 times down.
Oh, I want to play my song on the.
Dada cover my face,